So now let's get to how long does it take? Let's say you didn't know those things and you've been getting gluten. How long does it take the gluten that you ate to get out of your system? So there's two major things that we need to discuss as far as that time frame is concerned. And the first has to do with your transit time. How long is your digestive transit time? Because transit time is different for different people for different reasons. But remember, once you eat gluten, once you put it in your mouth, it's got to make the journey from your mouth out your anus before that gluten is out of your body, right? And so for some people, that transit time, they're having bowel movements once or twice a day. Although what you just ate doesn't just come out right away. There's a transit time is the time it takes to move its way through you. And so you can see these are some very well researched transit time numbers, meaning this is what researchers believe to be pretty accurate for healthy people, right? So 2 to 2.5 to 3 hours, your stomach, half of your stomach contents are emptied into your duodenum. And it takes 4 to 5 hours in total to totally empty the stomach, right? So once that happens, the food is dumped into your duodenum, which is your small intestine. And so you see here 2.5 to 3 hours, you have 50% of the small intestine is emptied, okay, into the colon, which is the large intestine, right? And then the time to transfer through the colon is between 30 and 40 hours for it to get through. So from the time it enters you to the maximum time that it leaves you, if you have good functioning bowel, is between 39 and 52 hours. So if you got gluten, it's not going to even be out of you until that 39 to 52 hour mark. So keep that in mind, because that, again, it'll stay in you for that long a time. And as long as it's in you, guess what it's potentially doing? It's creating damage, right? So one of the things that gluten does is it incites an immunological reaction, meaning your immune system will see and perceive that gluten as a threat, and it will create chemical antibodies, it will create chemical inflammatory compounds in an effort to try to neutralize gluten. Now, as long as that's in you, that means your immune system sees that and is going after that for many, many hours, you know. And so where is your immune system? Most of it is in your gut, right? 70% of your entire immune system lives in your gut wall. It's called the GALT, the gastro-associated lymphoid tissue. So 70% of your immune system is right behind the gut wall. And so if you eat gluten, and it takes 52 hours for that gluten to leave, then that's 52 hours of immunological exposure to gluten that you're getting. That means your body is producing and generating chemicals of inflammation as long as that exposure is happening, if you're gluten sensitive. And then there are different transit times as well. So we think about what influences transit time. So some foods, like I see some people, a lot of times what you have to keep in mind is if you are gluten sensitive, one of the problems is your pancreatic function is diminished. One of the other things we see is low stomach acid. Stomach acid production is diminished. And so if your ability to produce digestive enzymes and your ability to make acid is diminished, that means your transit time is going to be slower because you're not breaking the food down and it's not propulsing through you as quickly. But one of the other ways that we see gluten affect people is neurologically. So it reduces peristalsis neurologically. Remember, your gut, there are waves of muscular contraction that push and propulse the food through your GI tract, and that can be affected neurologically by gluten. There's actually a condition that we know gluten can cause where it creates stasis in the gut. So you can't, your gut doesn't push the food through, and your transit time becomes massive, and then you have to do things like enemas, and you have to do things like flushing, like taking products that flush out the bowel in an effort just to have a bowel movement. So gluten can reduce peristalsis, it can reduce pancreatic function, it can reduce stomach acid. Gluten damage can also reduce the liver's ability to produce bile, which is what is very helpful and necessary to digest and absorb fat. And this is why so many people with gluten issues have fat malabsorption problems. And so again, these are all digestive in nature, and when you're inhibiting digestion, you're increasing transit time. This is one of the reasons why a lot of celiacs can have diarrhea, because their gut is flushing itself out on purpose to try to get rid of the gluten. But more people have constipation than have diarrhea with gluten issues. That's my experience. decades of experience, that's what we see. More people struggle with the constipatory effects than they do with the diarrheal effects. So the odds are, if you're watching this, again, everybody's unique in their own right, but odds are if you're watching this, then you probably struggle more with a slower transit time than with a faster transit time. So we know gluten-induced damage to the GI tract can slow down transit time. We also know that depending on that, different types of food, right? So like if your stomach acid's being affected by gluten, and you eat heavy protein diet, guess what? That protein's not going to break down because you need acid to break it down. And so now it's going to sit in your gut, it's going to sit in your stomach, and it's going to start putrefying, it's going to start rotting. And that putrescent byproducts of that food can now start creating damage to your intestinal tract. But again, it creates a constipation, so it can increase that total transit time. I've seen people who couldn't poop for a week, right? And that was normal for them. And they thought, I thought it was normal to only poop once a week. That's the way it's been my whole life. It's not normal. You should be pooping at least once a day, preferably once to twice a day, and in some healthy bowels, 1 and up to 3 times a day, just depending on the style of diet that you eat and how good your digestion is. But again, other things that can affect transit time are stress. And so gluten is a form of chemical stress on the gut, but other types of stress, lack of sleep, maybe bad relationships, maybe you've got heavy metal exposure, or you've got other chemical exposures that you've had. Maybe you're worried about things at work. Maybe you're worried about your children. Whatever it might be, things that weigh heavy on your mind drive what's called sympathetic dominance. Sympathetic nervous system slows down digestion. So when you're under stress, you make hormones of stress that activate part of your nervous system that slows down digestion. Because when you're under stress, your body is thinking fear, fight or flight, if you will. And so your body's not thinking, let's relax and digest things. It's thinking, let's escape the danger. So digestion, all the blood flow to the gut is shunted away from the gut and to the muscles to help your body escape the danger that you're perceiving from that stress. And so it shuts down or slows down digestion, activating the sympathetic nervous system. We know gender can play a role in this. Certain hormones can play a role in this. Exercise, movement is very critical for healthy bowels. People that don't get exercise generally have a lot more constipation problems. We know that sleep is a form of stress, so sleep is going to impact this. We know hydration. A lot of people don't drink enough water. And so they don't have enough fluid in their bowel, and so they get constipated or backed up. So there are other things that can affect this. And one of the things that I see commonly is drinking ice water with meals. This is a mistake. Ice water, it's like putting an ice pack. Why do we put an ice pack on an injured shoulder, injured joint? It's to reduce blood flow, and by reducing blood flow, we reduce pain and inflammation. Well, if you're dumping ice water on your gut every time you try to eat, what are you doing? You're reducing the potential for blood flow to make it to your GI tract, and you can slow down your digestion with ice water. So my advice at meals is don't do that. Drink room temperature beverage and try to avoid those super cold beverages that are loaded up with ice. Just not a good idea. If you're going to drink iced beverage, do that away from eating food. Do that by itself without having to put the food in and give the body the need to have to digest all of that when you're shunting blood flow away. So again, a lot of things can impact and affect your transit time, and so this is one of the issues. But if we take just a generally a normally healthy gut, on the long end of that, it's 52 hours, meaning from mouth to anus, it takes that gluten 52 hours to traverse its way out of your body to stop inciting your immune system from reacting. So that's step one, right? It's how long is that gluten there where it's creating an immunological response? Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.